Okay, my time on 29 Squadron came to an abrupt close. I was suddenly posted to Lookers in Scotland, up by St Andrews, to reform 150 Squadron, which was the first night fighter squadron in the Royal Flying Corps, actually, formed on June 12, 1918 at Hainault in Essex. So it had quite a long history, and during the war, of course, it was extremely active. Anyway, just before I left Tangmere, 29 Squadron, we had that terrible accident with the Mosquito, and both pilot and navigator were killed. The navigator had gone through the training for the night fighter radar side together. I can't recall his name, he was just known as Mac. And he had a great wall record. He'd done a tour on B-45s, the RAF called it Boston, B-O-S-T-O-N. It was a light twin-engine bomber, and he did his 35 missions on that. So he was quite an experienced navigator. Anyway, I got the job of taking his casket up to his home, which oddly enough was about 10 miles from my hometown as well. So I had a good trip there. It was a sealed casket for obvious reasons. He'd been quite badly bashed up. And when I met his dad, he wanted to see his son again. I said, but he'd seen quite a few dead bodies in World War I now. And I said, well, that was probably so, but none were your son, so we kept the thing sealed, fortunately. And had a very nice service. And then I went from there out to St Andrews, which is right next door to Lucas, famous for the home of golf. And that was quite good. I arrived there on a Tuesday of all days, and there was quite a lot of activity going on flying with two squadrons there, 43 Squadron. Oddly enough, that was a squadron that had been formed at my hometown back in 1914 for the Royal Flying Corps, so it had a great history, known as the Fighting Cocks. The squadron mascot was a cockerel, and they had a chicken coop with hens and him there as well. And on the base, and that was quite interesting. So anyway, my arrival, the building there was a pre-war building. It was shaped like the capital letter H. The vertical sides were the bathrooms and the sleeping quarters for individual rooms for all the officers. And the centre section was where we had the bar, the cloakroom, washroom, main big anteroom, a library, and a ladies' room where officers could bring their wives in, or girlfriends for that matter, so they didn't get around all the individual officers living there. Anyway, I was in the bar. I just arrived after lunch and was having a quiet drink there, and a squad leader came up to me with pilot's wings, and of course I was in uniform at the time, and he congratulated me and said, welcome, it's good to see another brevet other than pilot's wings, because that's all that were there. And of course he'd done a tour on bombers during the war, and he was used to seeing air gunners, wireless operators, engineers, navigators, air gunners, a whole bit, brevets around the mess. So I said, well, don't worry about you, you're going to get another influx of quite a few navigators in a very short time frame. So that was the start of it. My pilot, who was going to be my pilot, and the squadron leader running the squadron was the squadron leader, Don Boyle. And he had quite a bit of time, but mainly on four-engine stuff, so he was pretty new to the jet age. But he was, I wouldn't class him as an ace pilot, but he was pretty good. And I was quite confident he could fly the damn thing. And we started within a few days. We opened up our own squadron. We got our first not for jet, NF-11. It was a Vampire, a single engine job. It was twin boom, built by de Havilland. I liked it because it had side-by-side seating like I'd been used to in the Mosquito. And that was our first aircraft. We also got in a Meteor 7, which was a dual trainer, which was shared by quite a few others, the other two squadrons as well. And of course I had all the markings on it. We got to pick our own markings for the aircraft, and I suggested we get the Cross of St Andrews, which is a white cross on a blue background. It's the Scottish national flag. And we used that and then put a black border all the way around it. And we thought we might not get it because I didn't like to use national flags for your markings, but somehow it slipped through and we got the markings. And many years later, I was on a visit to Scotland, calling lookers, and sure enough, they had the Javelins there, which was a Delta Wing night fighter, and there was the old same markings we had at ours. I was very pleased to see it. Anyway, we started getting the crews to come in, and the first one in was a guy, Flight Lieutenant Dick Peters, a very tall young man, and his navigator was Jeff Claret, and I'd never met him before, but we hit it off quite well. He was in charge of one of the flights. We made it two flights called A and B flights. I think he took A and B flight with another one, Flight Lieutenant Jones. So we gradually filled up, and I, of course, was the senior navigator, nav leader, and we got down to the business of getting our house in order, and it worked out quite well. But our CEO, John Boyle, was also a bachelor, so he became the president of the officers' mess, senior living-in officer, as rank of squadron leader. So that settled us in, and it worked out quite well. He also had a little Welsh corgi dog, and it was quite amusing because certain noise levels, if you're taxiing by, the dog was starting howling at the moon or daylight for that matter because of the sound of the engine. So we had to taxi around at a lower setting so we didn't upset his dog, which was quite amusing. Anyway, we got into the business of day flight, night flying work as well. And one good thing about it, we could do low level cross country. There were certain areas of Scotland marked off for low flying legally, which was quite good. I enjoyed that immensely. It was really good to see stuff whizzing by at high speed, 50 or 100 feet above the ground. And we were doing quite well. One of our sorties, we had to simulate what we'd done during the war was mine laying. I remember my 102 squadron bombers, we did some of that there, and you didn't do any high flying. In fact, I'd never flown above 20,000 feet till we got onto jets, which is, or onto mosquitoes rather, when I went to 35,000. But anyway, coming back to our flying, mine laying was always done from about 500 feet. And you could mine anywhere in harbours or usually on shipping routes. And that, during the war, from Norway down to Germany, that was a common route, and it was attacked heavily with the North Sea shipping that was going on by the Nazis at that time. Anyway, we would fly at 500 feet, and the fighter would fly at 300 feet under radar control from a ground GCI, ground controlled interception radar on the north coast of Scotland, down in Ayrshire. And what happened, we were flying, we had done one sortie, we took it in turns. You'd fly as the target, and then the other time you'd fly as the fighter attacking it. And we were flying on, it was the second time we'd flown that evening. We did about an hour at a time. It was really being not enough fuel to do a long time in the air. Anyway, we were flying along with 500 feet, and I could see the fighter had his lights on, and he came round, and he was at a very high angle back, so the navigator was Sergeant Brooks, and as a crew they were quite experienced. They'd been on 23 Squadron down at Coltishall, and they were very good and experienced air crew. Anyway, I don't know what happened, but they lost control and went in. And of course, unfortunately, my G-box wasn't working very well that night, so I suggested we get up to 5,000 and make sure they got a good fix, so we could look for hopefully somebody survived in the morning. That was not the case. Both were killed. It's a great shame. The navigator was a Sergeant Brooks, and I can't remember the pilot's name. He was also a sergeant. So that was our only casualty. And of course, we did the usual military cemetery at the local churchyard for what we had offered. They didn't find any of the bodies, they just for the service. And that was that. So just shortly thereafter we got our, what do you call it, the Meteors, NF-11 two-seat night fighter. And it was basically a stretch Meteor 7 trainer with all the navigators and a big radar dish, and it was SCR 720 was the radar. It was a German, it was an American system, single core radio. It was a 10 good set at a range of about 10, 12 miles. Compared to the German night fighter radio, was good for about 3 miles during the war, so we'd advanced quite a bit. It was a very easy equipment to use, and you could get a pretty good picture on the screen from even a small thing like a meteor or even a vampire. So it was a very fine radar indeed. And we continued with that, and we took part on the Queen's coronation. We had a big ball in the mess for that, and the formation she came up for a visit to Scotland, which she did quite often. In fact, she died there many years later, but it was a very popular time for the royalty. And we did a flyby. She was going to be watching a soccer game at Ibrox Stadium Hampden Stadium rather, in the middle of Glasgow. So we led the formation with night fighters. We had the radar and all the navigation equipment, and we formed up. We had a formation of about 36 aircraft, and we were the lead one because I was doing the navigation, and one of my buddies keeping check that we were right on course on our number 2, and we flew down to the eastern side of Scotland on the estuary of the River Clyde, and then we turned left towards Glasgow, which is the main city, and we hit it right on time and at the right height flying along there. It must have been pretty impressive from the ground. Unfortunately, the Queen had been held up in traffic, so she missed the actual flyby, but we didn't know that at the time. So that was pretty much how we operated up in Scotland. It was daytime flying low-level stuff. That was always fun. And at night we'd do our stuff with working with the radar and simulated. Most of our interceptions were over the North Sea, so the dig controls were a priority. You had to be sure you knew what the heck to do. There's a chance of making it up. We didn't have ejector seats in those days. In fact, of all the jets I flew, I never sat in an ejector seat. I did when I came over to the Marine Corps in '54, but that was only for part of your routine training. We didn't have them in the air every day that we had. And that's later on in my brief history. So what happened, once I finished my tour at Lucas, I was posted down to West Wright Central Fighting Establishment, and that was the airfield where they tested all new theories and actual practice of night fighter and day fighter tactics and so on. And we flew Meteor NF-11s and NF-12s, I think it was. We had a different type of radar in this aircraft at that time also. And that was very interesting. I was there for about, maybe 2 or 3 months. And then after the war, I got posted to America on exchange duty with the Marine Corps. Oddly enough, the crew that we had an American crew from the Marine Corps on 29 Squadron. It was Major Thompson and Master Sergeant Larry Fortin. Of course, I got to know Larry quite well in the short time we were there. And when I arrived in California, both of them were there to meet the aircraft when I landed at John Wayne Airport. So it was really good to see them. I was with them for 2 years. Very fascinating time with the Marines. Anyway, getting a little ahead, I finished at West Wright and we were developing new radars for the Javelin and the DH de Havilland 110, which was a 2-seat version of twin boom and much bigger and faster aircraft than the Vampire, but it still had the twin booms at the back end. So I never did get to fly in that particular type of aircraft. Anyway, my time at West Wright was quite short, a matter of a few months, and then up came my posting to America. And I think that was due to the fact that my CO on 29 Squadron had been promoted. He's now a wing commander up at Fighter Command Headquarters in charge of all night fighting tactics and so on. And I think he was probably responsible for getting me the duty with, as they call it, with the Marines. And somehow people running the posting section got it screwed up, and W. Coordinator J.C. Douglas, he came a week ahead of me. I came over once again on the Queen Mary. This time, of course, it was peacetime, and it was really luxurious. It was about 4.5 days to New York, and it was a very pleasant trip. It was nice to be seeing the old ship again, and walking around. I could go just about anywhere, and I never did get up on the bridge, but I got to meet quite a few of the crew. Most of a large number were Scots people anyway, and that was quite fascinating. So we docked in New York, and I was met by a sergeant, RAF fellow, who gave me all my instructions and travel tickets and so on to get down to Washington, to the Joint Service Mission there, where I'd be briefed on what to do and what not to do, and so on with the Marines. So I then flew out to the West Coast, and I landed in LAX, which flew a DC-6, I think it was a prop plane. I hadn't got jets at that time, and that was quite interesting. And came into a puddle jumper which flew down from LAX to Santa Ana, which is only about 40 odd miles anyway, so a very short flight. And that's when I met my pilot. He was there to meet me with his wife and kid, and of course the 2 Marines from my old days of 29. And that was my arrival in America. So, I was living on the base at that time, as the head Elton was a very big base indeed. It was a major one during the war. And it had 6 runways here, 3 parallels forming a usual triangular type of layout of the runways. Anyway, the quarters I had, they had very good, nice quarters, but a very limited number of rooms. So I was living out what had been a wartime accommodation. It was quite comfortable, but you're all in rooms. I got friendly with one guy, Major Bob Anderson. He was been in Korea as well as World War II, and he was on the ground staff. Heck of a nice guy, really enjoyed him. And that was my start with the Marine Corps. I think I covered that on the previous thing. But anyway, having spent 2 years with Marines, we went back. I met quite a few ladies, of course, as a bachelor, living down on the Laguna Beach, on the actual coast of California. Very nice little town. Anyway, we came back, we drove our cars across country to Washington, and then shipped it back, not on the Queen Mary, it was on the Queen Elizabeth this time, so I sailed twice with two of the Queens. Very interesting. Anyway, getting back to the UK, having fired missiles, I finished up, mainly thanks due to Dougie. I think he pulled a few strings and got me going to Valley and Northwest Wales, where we formed we were testing new Fairy Fireflash, a beam rider missile, rather similar concept. The missile was boosted off with two rockets, one on either side, and they'd be jettisoned once it reached supersonic speed, and it would fly around the beam down to the target. And that was pretty much the same thing I had been doing with the Americans, with the Sparrow 1. So the program was cut short, fortunately. I was only there for 3 or 4 months. And next thing I knew, I was being posted to the Royal Flying College at Manby, which was really a fascinating job. I was one of the guided weapon experts, so-called. And the boss at that time was a wing commander, Warburton, and he was about ready to leave because he'd been there for 2.5 years, and he was going off to fly 4-engine Shackletons in Coastal Command. And the guy in charge of it then was squadron leader Ken Tabor, T-A-B-O-R, heck of a nice guy, and he was a navigator. And 2 other guys formed a group, Flight Lieutenant Clark, and first of all it was Flight Lieutenant Dave Clinton, and he was there. The 3 of us were the sort of embryo size of guided weapon training for officers in the RAF, regardless of rank, all the way up to Air Marshal practically. So it was a fascinating job, and I loved it. I'd never done any lecturing before, but I fell into it more by accident, but it worked out okay. I was there for 2.5 years. I won't go into all the details on it, but one of the benefits of being at Royal Flying College at Manby, M-A-N-B-Y, in Lincolnshire, is you got pretty well to decide where you want to go when you finish your time there. Usually about 2.5 years for a tour. And I said, well, I've been talking about these damn missiles all for 2.5 years. I'd like to go and fire one if I can. So I opted to take a course back in America on the Thor ballistic missile. We were getting 60 of them in the RAF during the Cold War. And we have a massive field which had 4 satellites, and each satellite had 3 missiles, and each had a 1.2 megaton warhead sitting on top of it. And that was the plan and the theory for the Cold War, until we got our own blue streak, which was still on the drawing boards, although they were firing them down at Australia at the Woomera rocket range. Anyway, cutting that short there, I finished up coming back to America. And of course, just before I left, I met a gal at the wedding of one of the Marines on the squad. His name was Walt Cunningham. And Walt was a damn good young pilot. And Debbie's brother had gone through flight school with him. And of course, Debbie's brother being individually out, he had a flame out in his Panther jet when he was coming into land and crashed the aircraft, unfortunately. And he was invalided out, couldn't fly anymore. So anyway, Walt Cunningham went on to be one of the Apollo 7 astronauts. And at his wedding is where I met Debbie. And it was really quite interesting. We kept corresponding. I met her about 6 weeks before I went back to the UK. I didn't know where I was going to go, so never thought I'd ever see her again. And of course, by that time, we'd been corresponding with letters, and she was living in Hawaii and doing quite well with it. And she came back to America, and in the papers, we got married there. And I did 2 years with the Thor Missile Project, and we were based at Carnaby. Well, Carnaby was one of the 3 major airfields for emergency landings in World War II. Woodbridge was one, and Mansfield was the other. And of course, it wasn't being used for aviation anymore. They built 3 missile pads at the far end of the runway. And so when I arrived there, and we lived off base, and it was almost like being a civilian. You did 3 days, 8 till 4, then 3 nights, 4 till midnight, then 3 nights, 3 midnight till 8 in the morning. Once you did your 12, you got 10 days off. It was really like being on holiday. So we arrived in England on a Britannia. Often the pilot had been a fellow I'd known for quite some time before, and he got himself flying these in Transport Command. So these odd things happen to me all the time. Coincidences with various bonds from time to time. But it was quite common with me. Anyway, Debbie and I, Debbie came back, she flew with us on the transport, landed at RAF London, but I'd been there before in Transport Command. And then from there we went up to London, checked into the Air Ministry, and then moved up to back up to Yorkshire. We stayed with Freddie Sanders and his wife Monty. They'd been with me at Lucas. They weren't married when we were at Lucas, but they had married in the meantime, and they were living at RAF Manby on the virtually taking over my job on the guided missile side. He was also a navigator. So we stayed with him for a couple of days while I picked up my new Sunbeam Alpine sports car and took off for Yorkshire to find accommodation, as we were not going to be living on the base with no room, too many officers. So we found eventually a little cottage in West Ayton, which is about 10 or 12 miles inland from Scarborough, which is one of the great seaside resorts on the east coast of Yorkshire. A very nice countryside. If you see the movie series, All Creatures Great and Small, that was virtually the type of life we were leading. It was really like being a civilian, and my duties were quite easy. With an American officer with several actually, and they all rotated in a similar schedule as we were doing. And the consul had 2 keys. I turned one and the American officer would turn his, and that way we had control of who fired the missile. One amusing thing happened. I had a bunch of American congressmen or goodwills soiree over to Europe, and they visited one of the area bases, And the guy, one of the congressmen said, what happens if you can't find the American officer? Tell him his key. And the Arab guy said, oh, you just press down on where he puts the key in. It shorts out anyway. And there was an immediate panic that the Brits could start World War III without anyone knowing about it. And they modified all the things so that didn't happen. But we had one, our Major Fred Hickey. He was a heck of a nice guy. He had a big family, about 5 or 6 kids. Yeah, he had one in every class in this local school. And I think if he'd run for mayor of the town, he'd have got it, because he was very popular with all the people. Heck of a nice guy. So we had this brand new little cottage, a bungalow, and it was a 2-bedroom, big kitchen, and a pantry. Of course, air conditioning was not prevalent at that time, so it was just a normal little house. In the winter time, it was quite snug. And we had just over 2 years there, and then suddenly the Air Ministry decided that too many flight lieutenants and Russia was going to get really thin on the ground, so they gave everybody the option of signing on or getting out. So I thought, well, very good buddy of mine, Ken Pete, he was a pilot, and we both said, well, we'll emigrate back to America, of course, with an American wife. By that time, we had a baby son, Douglas, and Dougie was 4 months old when he came to America. Of course, when I came over, Debbie just came back. She had her American passport as a native anyway. But one of the things, I had to apply to get citizenship, and that takes several years. If I'd waited, nowadays they're doing it, you can be granted asylum and live in America, and you'll be granted citizenship after 5 years without any tests or any damn thing. So I had to wait Dougie, my son, had to wait. Well, he waited, didn't even think about it, and neither did I. As I thought he came in as an American with his American mother. But what happened was he gets a letter from the State Department when he was 21 asking if he wanted to become a citizen. And of course, that took him 3 years to become one. And so he'd be here all his life, but that's by the by. In the meantime, I thought with all the technical knowledge I had, I'd be all set to get into aerospace side. And I interviewed with the head Navy down in North America, and we had a very interesting interview. And he said, well, I could use you in about 2 jobs right now. He said, but I can't get you clearance. I said, I've got a top secret atomic clearance. He said, yeah, but that's a British one. They don't recognize it as such. So I didn't have enough technical know-how to sway them anyway. So that sealed my fate as to what my future was going to be. It was not going to be in aerospace. And by that time, I kept in touch with Walt Cunningham. He was on the Apollo 7 thing, and he arranged an interview down at North America, Rockwell, where they were building his capsule. So I saw everything there, quite fascinated, because there was nothing secret on it. So that was my end of my military type service. So it left me with a choice of something to do. And I didn't want to go back to school and take a teaching job and take years to get your certification. So I finished up quite by accident in the car business, which oddly enough it turned out to be very, very lucrative for me. I finished up, I started off like all people do, as a salesman on the line. And of course, with my accident, I fell into imported cars. It worked quite well, and eventually I was a part owner in a dealership with Land Rover. And that was another whole chapter in my life, which was quite fascinating. And the car business, met some fascinating people through it. I also got involved in motor racing quite a bit, and at that time I met a lady who came into the dealership. Her husband was Len Terry, and he had been at Lotus Cars in England, a very famous racing mark, and he was now working for All-American Racers for Dan Gurney, designing the American Eagle, Dan's first car. Well, it wasn't his first one. They built 6 to begin with. 2 for India, and then they sold 4 to customers. And it was a beautiful car. In fact, many years later, it got the best looking race car ever built. And it was really a pretty car. And of course, with that, my knowledge, I got involved in the Sports Car Club of America and finished up doing announcing. I worked with Ken Squires on CBS. He was a damn good announcer. I didn't do any actual announcing, I just did the time and scoring for him. And that launched it off. I became quite established with the Sports Car Club of America, and I attended all the Sports Car Club races, and sometimes the Formula One. I actually came to Riverside. They only raced there once, but Riverside race, which was really a damn good track out in the mountains. Well, not now, it's being gobbled up by housing and buildings. But in those days, it was pretty much on its own. And if you come off the track, you were in the desert with sand and dust everywhere. So I had a great time doing that. Jim Matthews, I was working as a test editor for Road Test magazine. O.C. Rich was the publisher. He was the editor. I can't recall the guy's name who was the publisher of the magazine. It sold pretty well. We were too proud of the fact we didn't take any advertising. So we were testing a car. You could tell it like it was. If it had some faults, you put it down in black and white. And that I kept in touch with that for many years. I quite enjoyed it. I've been used to writing reports, so writing technical stuff was second nature to me. So I don't have any copies of the magazine left anymore, they're all gone. But that was how my career finished up, and now I find myself in assisted living, which is okay, but I must admit I've lost my power of eyesight, so legally I'm blind, but I can see shapes, but I can't see I can't see details, and I can't read a book or anything. And for TV, I've got a good sized TV screen, but I've got to get within about 3 feet of it to see who's who on the screen. So life goes on. At 99, I can't really complain. So in these assisted living, it's nearly all 80% women. You get about 20% guys, but most of the guys have got some ailment of some kind or other. I don't think there's anybody, but I'm the only one who's blind here, which is a nuisance. I have to rely on Debbie to do all the driving now, which I hate because I always loved it when I was driving on my own anyway. So that briefly gives you a very broad brush picture of what my 20 years in the RAF were like. I look back and I met some wonderful people as a result of that in the service and outside of it, especially when I came to America. But the service life was really great, and even then, I flew with one guy when we did a proven flight to Rhodesia, which never got there. We finished up in Nairobi for about a week. But we flew over Mount Kilimanjaro, and the guy flying the aeroplane was Colonel Hank Iverson, and he'd been one of the first raids on the Turpits up in Norway. he was flying the Halifax 1, which was a bit of a death trap, because they found out that the rudder on the back end wasn't good enough. If you lost an engine, you were pretty well doomed to crash. And it took them time to get that. And one I flew during the war was the Halifax 3, and that had a rectangular tail, and it was a damn good airplane. They used it doing all sorts of things other than bombing. Met flights over the Atlantic, air sea rescue, you name it, they did it, parachute, dropping spies and so on, all over Europe. So it's quite a fascinating thing. So as I say, I've met quite a few people who were quite famous. One was a Wing Commander Griffin, W.G. Griffith, and he'd been shot down in Halifax. He was on 100 group, and they were dropping supplies to the French underground, and he got shot down, and he managed to escape down into Switzerland, and he was the only one who survived. The rest of his crew were killed, and he got picked up by the French underground, and he wrote a book about it. And unfortunately, I never did get a copy, but I did read it. He gave me the original transcript. It was a fascinating tale. It really was. And he made it all the way from northern France down to Switzerland, got in there, and then he came back into France, hooked up with the underground again, and made all the way down to Spain, across the Pyrenees, and he's lived in a house. He's a member of the Flying Boot Club. There's 3 clubs for airmen only. There's a Caterpillar Club, for if you bail out of an airplane to save your life, you become a member. The symbolism of caterpillar hanging by a silk thread before it becomes a butterfly. Then the Goldfish Club, if you ditch your aircraft or if you bail out and land in the sea, you get in a rubber dinghy, you become a member of the Goldfish Club. And the Flying Boot Club is a very rare one, because if you walk out in a sense like Wing Commander Griffiths did, by escaping an invasion with the aid of the underground and making it all the way down into Spain, he became a member of the Flying Boot Club. He also he was flying back from Spain, Gibraltar, where he finished up with Spaniards, turned him over to the French down there, and to the Brits down there on the Rock, and he came back in a Warwick, W-R-A-W-I-C-K, a Warwick. It was really a converted Wellington bomber with seats in it, and they came back around the Bay of Biscay, and managed to avoid the Germans. This was during the war, of course. He managed to evade the Germans and get back to England. And as they were flying along over the Bay of Biscay towards England, there was a very loud bang in the aircraft, and he didn't know what the hell had happened. And the crew came back and they checked in the back end to see if the baggage had exploded or something. What had happened had been struck by lightning. And what was odd was the nose of the aircraft opened like a door, and they didn't know it at the time, but they'd been struck by lightning, and when they landed, all the hinges had melted with the lightning strike, and the nose fell off the aircraft and the thing ground down the runway. So that was him back in England after about 6 months from when he got shot down. Very interesting man. I flew with him quite a few times in our communication aircraft when I was at group headquarters. So that briefly is the broad brush treatment of what it was like for 20 years in the RAF. I was a bachelor for 18 of them. So marrying Debbie was a big change in my life, obviously. And we're still married. That's been 63 years now. so we're doing quite well. And she's exactly 10 years younger than me. And what's amazing, we both had the same birthday. And when I was working with a Jaguar dealership, the guy's brother, his cousin lived next door to us, and he had the same birthday we had, which was quite a novelty. We just loved that. All four of us would go out for dinner, our birthdays, and one day we were in one restaurant, and we'd use a different restaurant each year, and it was the waitress' birthday, and she'd never met anyone with the same birthday, and all of us, there were three of us sitting there enjoying the evening. So my life's been full of odd coincidences and coincidences like that. Sorry, but my speech is slowing down a little bit, sorry. But it gives you a rough idea of what 20 years was like. It was eventful, to say the least, and I met some wonderful people as a result of it, both in the service and out of it afterwards. So I'll let it go at that. Thanks very much. I hope it didn't get too boring, and I'm sorry my voice or my diction is not as smooth as it used to be. When I think back to my days as a night fighter navigator, describing what's happening to a pilot in the dark of night from the radar set, this speech handicap is a bit of a nuisance now. So I'll let it go at that. So I hope it's interesting for you. Right, bye-bye.